Thank you for watching Conscious Consumer Network. The live stream broadcast is free to view. You can pause and rewind live broadcasts to catch up, or view shows at a later date by accessing our free archives of all shows. Check out our broadcast guide to see what's on. You can show your support by donating to our network support fund. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, or subscribe to the monthly newsletter for updates. We thank you for supporting free and independent media.
This is For the Love of Learning, Voices of the Alternative Education Movement. Be inspired by the voices of visionaries, changemakers, and ordinary, extraordinary people who do what they do, all for the love of learning.
This is For the Love of Learning, Voices of Alternative Education Movement. I'm Miranda Ortiz de la Cajiga, and this is episode number 94. On this occasion, I have the privilege of substituting Lainey Liberty, our regular host, and we're going to be talking about off-grid living and education. Our panel today is made up of some great mix of guests and perspectives, and that is sure to make this conversation very, very interesting. I'm going to ask them each to introduce themselves briefly, and then we'll start the conversation. If you want to know more about them, their complete bios and links to their work and web pages, please head to the show notes page located at theconsciousconsumernetwork.tv. Look for the notes page for episode 94. So in no particular order, I'm going to introduce our guests, and we will be starting with Philip. Philip, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing and what you and your wife Allison are up to as far as off-grid living?
Sure, yeah. Thanks for having me. My name's Philip Bena, and I live right outside of Washington, D.C., and I'm involved with the unschooling movement a little bit, with helping with some conferences as well as talking about being homeschooled and making a living and making a life and surviving, kind of in the world. So it's been neat to be involved in such a neat movement. And I got really interested about 5 years ago in off-grid living and homesteading, especially, more on the homesteading side. I've made one attempt to have a complete off-grid cabin in Pennsylvania, but the community basically put a stop to that, and that was with another friend and his family. We're going to kind of team up and do that together. So, but I do, I own a house here outside of DC where I have a garden. We just got our first chicken, and we're about to get 3 more, and so that's been going really well. Gardening, we've run into challenges where just things, there's a lot to learn there. It seems simple, like, throw a seed in the ground and water and it grows, but there's a lot more to it, and we've been learning that, and we're just trying to keep pursuing, kind of the gardening thing and livestock, and that's about it.
Thanks, Philip. Now, you're actually also a homeschool graduate, if one ever graduates from being a homeschooler. Could you tell us a little bit about that as well?
Sure. Yeah. I was part of a umbrella kind of organization. They were state accredited, but you could either go to the small kind of school they had, which was way out in Western Maryland. And since we were about 3 hours away from that, you could also do like, homeschool and kind of send some of your work in. You did have to go there for testing. And, but yeah, no, all 18 years, of my childhood, I was homeschooled. And so I decided not to go to college. A lot of kids did go to college after that, but I took one semester and I had a hard time sitting in a classroom and decided to just try and, make a living a different way. And so I started an internship at a recording studio right after that. And for the last 12 years, I've had a career in audio and photography and video. And so, yeah.
Fantastic. Well, that adds a lot to the perspective that you're going to be bringing into this conversation. So thank you for that. Leslie, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Leslie, and I'm part of a family that is unschooling here in Central Michigan. We have just under 4 acres. We organic garden with the permaculture twist to it. We have some chickens, we have some rabbits, but really I'm a plant person, so that's really where all my experience comes. And just to let you know, Philip, 10 years now I've been working on my garden, and I'm just getting the soil right now. So it's an ongoing process. It'll be a while, but don't fret because it's fabulous. So we grow a lot of food here. We do a lot of preservation, canning, dehydrating, fermenting. We do foraging. I'm really big into herbal remedies, especially the ones that I can pick off the side of the road. So a friend of mine lovingly called me a weed witch, and I wholeheartedly embrace that. We are beginning to host more and more community workshops for our community, our close community of friends and other interested people. We will be doing a mushroom one where we're inoculating mushrooms. We do ones on kombucha. I'll show people how to can just about anything. You want to make clothes, come on over. You want to learn to sew, crochet, we do it all here. So that's kind of what we got going on here. We still are sort of on the grid, electricity only. We've got a well and a septic, and we heat with wood. Things like that. So we're getting there. Hopefully with a new roof, we'll get new solar and get our water system hooked back up, and we'll be good to go then. So that's where we're at right now.
Wow, Leslie, that's fantastic. I actually, having lived off grid now for almost 10 years, I have to tell you, for me, the biggest challenge is the garden part. And it's been really rough on us. So I admire what you're saying. Could you also tell us a little bit more about your kids and what approach you're taking to education with them?
We are actually unschoolers, so my kids kind of live and learn right along next to us. Although not all of them are as into homesteading as we are, we do allow them to kind of freely find their passions and pursue them and just give them what they need. Although we do try to really encourage the reading, because reading is fundamental. Those sorts of things. But yeah, we have one son that's really into survivalist things, and he's been learning how to be a blacksmith. He whittles and wants to hunt and do all that sort of stuff. So it's kind of a broad range. I have a 13-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 6-year-old. So they're all still kind of, out there just trying things and trying to find their own passions yet. And we're just encouraging them as much as we can along the way.
Wow, Leslie, thank you very much for that. That's fantastic. We're going to be digging into a lot of that in the conversation. Now, I also want to introduce Molly and Shawn, and I will let them tell us a little bit about their project.
Hi, we're Molly and Shawn, and we have the Nancy Place Homestead and Hostel in Orland, Maine, and we do a variety of things here. We focus on a mix of annual vegetables. We're trying to move more towards a permaculture design with perennials each year, trying to add more. We do have about a 5-acre blueberry field, and then another part of our farm income is short-term rentals for travelers, vacationers, and that sort of thing.
I think we're having a little bit of an issue with Molly's audio over there, so it's a little choppy. I hope that you were able to hear that. They actually have a fairly well-established project where they've been living off-grid for quite some time and working with their kids there as well and hosting workshops. So hopefully when their audio gets a little stronger, we'll be able to hear a little bit more about that. In the meantime, and finally, I want to introduce Krystal and have her tell us a little bit more about what she's doing.
Hey, thanks for having me. So yeah, we have a smaller 1.5 acre property about an hour north of Austin, and we've been here about 6 years, and so we've been trying all that time to, really get going more and more. Lots of experiments. You don't you either win or you learn, right? So we've got our 5 kids. From my oldest will be 18, and then my next will be 15 this summer. Then we've got my middleest is about to turn 10, and 7 and 5. So the whole crew. We've been unschooling since 2004. So we're established in that regard. And then the homesteading thing is kind of just an outgrowth of how do you cope with life with, lots of people that all want to spend time together as opposed to, going to do the rat race thing and working a lot. So we've been, trying also to find natural health solutions, and that's kind of led us to do a lot of gardening. So we started out with a greenhouse. We found out the hard way. In Texas, you really kind of want a shade house, not a greenhouse. Had some cooked tomatoes on the vine there for a little bit, but it's all good fun. But yeah, we've got right now, I think, 21 chickens, so 19 hens, 2 roosters. We built our coop from scratch. My husband, Dennis, is about to get his permaculture design certificate. He's been training with the Whole Life Learning Center down in South Austin for the past 6 months, and he's really learned a lot in that course. So since he started, we've planted 79 different perennials. We have like a mad number of fruit trees in our yard, pretty large annual garden bed space. We've dug a swale for water harvesting. We've got rain barrels that are awaiting the little bits and pieces of pipe to set them up so that we could collect rainwater. And but yeah, we're still on grid, but we're slowly moving toward trying to get more and more able to disconnect from the system. But yeah.
Thank you, Krystal. Now, I think what I want to do is start this conversation by asking what it was that prompted you all to make the decision to start either homesteading or working towards being off-grid. Obviously, this is not the decision that most of society takes. This is not the normal life that you're supposed to grow towards. It's not the suburban house that they sell you from the project of suburban life and what you see on Friends when you're growing up on TV. So obviously, decisions had to be made in order for each of you guys to make this choice. Is there a sparking moment? Was there a specific thing that initially thrust you in this direction? What was it that got you thinking, this is the type of life I want to lead? Anybody can jump in. Leslie?
I'll have to say that it all probably began with our food journey when we started looking into the food that we were eating and becoming aware of just exactly what was going on. So when we started to change our diet is kind of the time that we decided. I've always been a plant lover, so I've always had like a salsa garden or something little, but really it was just to get the best food. And my husband and I aren't necessarily homesteaders where we have to do it all ourselves. Like I said, I'm not really a livestock person. I don't want to milk cows. I have no interest in owning a goat, but I do like the products that they give. So our big goal and our thing also was community. And it was also between the food journey that we were able to start connecting with people in our local community also to get good food and get good meat and get good milk. So really it all started with what we were putting into our body. And once we started doing that, we started looking at what was going on with our land around us and what we could actually do to help be a positive effect. So that's when we started growing our own food and looking into how we even grow our own food, because a lot of people in my area will still tell you Roundup is awesome and put that fertilizer down and life is good. And we're like, whoa, 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 we're no-till. And people look at us like we're strange. So really that was the beginning of our journey to homesteading and becoming more independent and more aware of just our effect on the land around us, being good stewards of the land that we actually own. You know, this is the one place where I can actually take a big stand to say, this is how I want it run, and this is my stewardship on my property, and to be able to share that with people and help other people aim for same goals, not necessarily to be even full homesteaders, but to be aware that you're a steward of where you are and you need to take care of it and yourself. So it's all kind of a big happy package that way.
Wonderful, Leslie. Krystal, would you like to tell us a little bit about what got you started on this trip?
Oh, goodness. Well, it's a bit of all roads lead to permaculture for us. My husband is from Germany, and when he came to the States, within like 6 months of coming to the States, he was very sick and had gained a lot of weight and just had a lot of very strange, health things that precluded him having, being able to have a regular job and things like that. And so we were really on this quest of what in the world is going on with your health and how can we fix it. And so among other things, going gluten-free really helped. And so for a while he was wanting to do paleo. So we were looking at, options for healthy meat, healthy eggs, healthy dairy, and also, getting away from just buying boxed things at the store to eat. So it was kind of a little bit of that. And then also just from a spiritual perspective of how can we be good stewards of the money we earn? How can we be good stewards of, this life that we're living? What is the most natural way to live? What is the most peaceful way to live? What are we doing, running after the next cool gadget to buy or whatever? Like, that didn't sound like a path to happiness for us. And so we were looking for something like more holistic, more like back to the land. And then slowly but surely other things came up. For instance, we discovered the work of Michael Reynolds, the creator of Earthship Biotexture. We went out to Taos and visited the homes that he builds, gorgeous homes that are made out of literal trash. And we really wanted to have something like that in our lives. We read about how owning that sort of home means that you're responsible for your consumption of water, your consumption of electricity, even simple things like heating and cooling your house. You have to be mindful of, oh, did I open the vent to create airflow? That's why it's hot in here, that kind of thing. Taking more responsibility for the minutia of our daily lives. And so, yeah, dietary, spiritually, economically, all roads lead to permaculture for us. So.
Yeah, I think when we talk about living off-grid and starting to homestead, one thing leads to another, and then it starts getting more and more change involved in people's lives. We're going to try Molly again and see if her and Shawn can actually chat with us a little bit. We really want to see their project. And actually, I have to say that I myself am not actually in my home right now because I am off-grid. Sometimes my internet is not fantastic. That is one of the challenges that I find as an off-gridder. So I had to move. They actually moved as well, but sometimes when you're not in your own space, sometimes these internet challenges are are part of what comes along with living differently. So Molly, Shawn, we're going to try you guys again.
Okay, well, for us, if you can hear us, living off grid was like, we really didn't even have to talk about it. It was like, you wanna? Yeah, of course. And then the land that we acquired, that we started our project on was, it was a quarter mile off the utility lines and whatnot. So it would have been cost prohibitive to even think of connecting. And so we started from scratch, clearing trees and creating our homestead from blank slate, so to speak. And that's just, right from the start where we're headed.
We have a modern homestead, so we have full solar array and batteries and a well and good stuff like that. We don't have internet at the house, but this is just a neighbor's place right now where we're at, just down the road. I lived off-grid before being with Shawn in a much more off-griddy kind of way, in a cabin in the woods, hauling water, and Shawn had imagination, so that's kind of our story.
Wonderful, but you guys have a whole big project going on with a whole bunch of workshops, and maybe you can let us in a little bit on that.
Okay, so yeah, if this sounds good. We're actually just coming into the workshop part of our mission. We have been homesteading and living off grid for 11 years. We have 4 children. Our oldest is 21. Our 3 daughters, so the oldest is our son, and our 3 daughters are 18, 13, and 11. The 13 and 11-year-old are kind of our own unique version of homeschool, unschool. They prefer kind of like a list format for their homeschooling, but they kind of make the list, so we kind of compromise there. Most of them were born at home, not at this home though, because they came before our homestead did. We're on a western-facing hill, so we are permaculturists, but it's a little hard, a little difficult being in a forest on a western-facing hill. We have terraces that collect the water.
Yeah, as far as workshop goes, we haven't hosted any workshops here. We do have a lot of conversations with our guests who come to stay at our eco rental spaces, and we're at this point going out into the community and doing some talks about some different things. Primarily right now, it's about some experiences we've had recently visiting indigenous resistance sites, Standing Rock and Oak Flat and places like that. So we're kind of like reaching out into the community and making connections with people who might be interested in future workshops and trying to collect contacts and network in that way. So it's in the future, but it hasn't actually started here yet.
It's in the near future though. It's coming quickly.
Fantastic. Thank you. That's part of the process. I think we're all definitely on a road that's a long, lifelong road. Now, Philip, for you, you are on that process as well. And I actually am very interested in what you said, that you actually tried to do an off-grid life and the community said no, they didn't like that. That's actually very interesting. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay, yeah. It really started as me and another guy from my neighborhood when I grew up. He was also homeschooled, so we've known each other our whole life. And we start talking about off-grid living, and I had a lot of ideas for like a cabin design, and thought it would be neat to get a property. And he's just really good at building things is what it comes down to, and he's helped me with a lot of projects here where I live right now. And so we started talking about how, it would be neat to do a project together. And he's married and he has 4 kids. And so it really started as almost like an off-grid vacation home though. And he lives outside of DC as well. And we're like, it'd be neat to have, spend a couple of years, start, designing this, build this, and have it where we could do that on weekends and kind of maybe slowly work out of our normal, lives. And so it wasn't necessarily like we were trying to, get off grid permanently, but it was almost like a kind of vacation home that would be off grid. But I always had in the back of my mind personally that it would, I was interested in possibly doing this full time. Besides, as a recording studio, which requires a lot of electricity at times. So I don't know. I never really got that totally worked out how that would work off grid. And also with I have a lot of instruments that are made of wood, and they need to almost be in a climate controlled situation. So I always kind of thought this location would be the studio, but if I could learn to have a place that was off grid and see how it goes, and it was kind of a trial thing. But I was kind of heading up the design side of that, and he was heading up the look in to see if we could actually do this. And so I found the property, we went and looked at it, we started talking with a realtor, and it was in our price range. And so my friend, he approached the town and started talking to them about is this something we could do. And because of the property, they were saying that we had to have public electric as well as public sewage and water, and they wouldn't allow us build unless we were going to do that. And so it was kind of like that's where it got stuck. But it was a great property. It had a river going through it. Really excited about that, and that's kind of where it got stuck. And so we kind of just put that project on hold, and it's we still talk about it, and it's just finding the right property, I guess, in the right location where it's allowed to happen.
Actually, that's very interesting. For ourselves over here in Mexico, my husband's an architect and an industrial designer, and he did our home, and he's devised all of our systems, and that's how it is that we started our off-grid venture. But when we think of going and maybe placing ourselves a little bit in Canada, which is where I grew up, my husband always says, yeah, but the construction laws and all of the city regulations, they're not going to allow me to do the things that I can do in Mexico. It's interesting, and it's a parallel to education. Sometimes the gaps in the Mexican system actually allow us to do some very interesting things down here. Has anybody else had any issues with their choice of starting your homesteading? Have the neighbors discussed what you're doing, the fact that you're not having the green lawn, or has it been smooth in your communities?
I'm from a pretty rural area, so it's all good to go here. You want to raise cows, raise some cows. We just had our neighbors come running in our yard going, 2 bulls got loose. We're trying to keep them in this block. So, the cops are on the road trying to keep. So for us, it was really quite easy to be like, oh yeah, we've got cows and chickens. We don't mow most of our lawn. It gets really kind of weird as if we start talking organically or permaculture, because it is the area up here, we've got a lot of fruit farmers and things like that, but they're traditional sorts of farming. So it's the techniques we use that people question a little bit more, but it doesn't usually come up. But we have found a small group of people that actually think that the way that we do also. So it's kind of nice to be able, it's been pretty accepting around here for us for the most part. But with the electrical thing, we are on the grid now. And although we are looking to go solar and getting off the grid, they probably will never let us actually disconnect from their system. So we will be not using their system, but like you said, we have to be connected to the electric grid. So one of our issues we've had, not that we've had it, but yeah.
Krystal, you've got some interesting things to say about city limits. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, one of, as I mentioned, I write for the Homestead Guru blog, and so I see a lot of stories and, national news type things that are happening. And one of the recent stories on there is about a former Marine who he has his home in city limits. I can't remember what state offhand, but he did everything to go off the grid, like disconnected from city power and water, and his home has been condemned. He's not allowed to occupy his property anymore, like crazy stuff's happening there. But that is kind of how the laws are set up. So if you're in city limits, they do require you to in most cases, be on the grid or, hooked up to city water and things like that. That's why if you're starting out with this and you're thinking, well, maybe I'll get property, definitely you want to look at things like, are you within city limits or not? What are the county bylaws? Do you have the mineral rights for your land? Because, for instance, fracking is a big thing here in Texas, sadly enough. And apparently the way it works is that even though you have private property, the bank may still own beneath your soil. And so they can do whatever they like. So if you don't have the mineral rights as part of your deed when you buy the home, you might run into some issues later. So you've really got to be clear on what your rights are and what you're buying when you're buying a property. Out here we have we live in a neighborhood, so like there's definitely some folks that want the suburban look to their land, and I'm sure they think we're crazy. But it's mostly along the lines of we're not going to get asked any questions. They're just going to go, that's weird. I think they have more chickens now, or I wonder what they're digging over there. But yeah.
Very interesting. Thank you. That's very, very interesting information. And for anybody who's listening to the show who's thinking of making the jump, that will definitely be very useful, what you were telling us, Krystal. Now, we're talking about education and alternatives in education. And the idea with this particular show is linking up alternatives in education with alternative in lifestyle choices. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on how living off-grid or homesteading actually connects with this alternative education that you're trying to give to your children or that you grew up in the case of Philip.
Oh, what the heck. Well, for us, it's giving our children, because we unschool, so it gives our children the ability to follow what they'd like to do. And because we are building community here, they do get to interact with a whole bunch of different people and get a lot of different views of just life in general. So for us, it's just been that independent and that freedom, not only for us on our land here and food raising sorts of things, but to allow our children to be able to have that also and their choices and the passions that they follow. Now, some of our kids are totally not interested in the homesteading stuff. My 13-year-old could not care less about gardening or anything, but my 9-year-old's totally into it, and he wants to know about hunting and foraging, and they can point at weeds and stuff and tell you about the plants in the garden. So it varies, but we're able to meet the needs of our kids and help them and support them in their passion pursuing. So this is just an extension of that, like you said. It's just, like you said, permaculture, their ideals kind of fit to life altogether, so we give that freedom to our kids, to our land, to our kids, to ourselves. We all got a bunch of freedom over here.
Thank you, Leslie. Now, I'm really curious about your child who could care less about homesteading. What does she think of this? What's her perspective on what you guys are doing, and if that affects her in any way? What kind of life would she prefer?
Well, it's my eldest son. So, and he is totally, he's a computer guy. He would rather do techie things on the computer, whether he's building something or, just designing something. But that's more his outlet. Engineering sorts of things. He's amazing at building like Lego stuff and everything, but he just doesn't have the same passion as to be out there in the garden every day digging in the dirt. He'll come out and help every once in a while, but since we don't require him to, he comes and goes. He'll come and check it out and leave, but that's just not, he's a computer guy, I guess. He'd rather be there doing that sort of stuff.
Very interesting. Now I want to go to Molly and Shawn and find out a little bit about how they link up their homeschooling with their family and what they're doing with their home life.
No pressure. So the youngest girls, we function kind of like a team. When we made a decision to start getting all of our income from our homestead rather than having an outside source of income. We had some serious family conversations about how that would be and how we would could we get along together, 24/7, and how would that look with what they wanted to learn for school stuff.
And also about, like without outside income, we would have to live without certain things. We couldn't go out to eat when we wanted to, or things like that. And were they willing to give up those things to have more time together? And, around the dinner circle, it was all, yeah, I think so. And it's worked out well so far. We're all still alive. We haven't killed each other. And I think it fits the lifestyle to have the unschooling all part of it, because the lifestyle is a more connected lifestyle that respects each individual as an individual and a human being. And I think that having kids growing up making their own choices about education in the setting of a homestead has been really special for them. And I think that even at 11 and 13, they already realize that. They do activities with kids that are, other homeschoolers, and then also kids from the public school system with some rec sports, and they do the drama club at the school and things, and they recognize a difference in behavior and attitudes and values that they feel pretty good about where they're at, I think. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. No, they're confident, strong girls. They pitch in with all the animal chores. We've got a few goats and a few horses and a few pigs and a lot of chickens.
Yeah, I want to tell Philip, once upon a time,
we had
only
chicken.
one chicken, and that was the only farm animal we had. But the chicken is the gateway farm animal, and before long, you're going to be like us.
Yeah. Yeah, it blends really nicely for us because we also like to travel some when we can save and scrimp and save and scrimp and save enough to do that. So we're not tied into homeschool classes in the community. We're just our own little thing. So that works really well for us. We have a really slow winter season. So we just have like the maintaining of the homestead, but all of our gardens are closed down since we're in on the East Coast. We're in the cold climate
zone.
Yeah. So our tourist season's done. Our growing season's takes a break, and maple syrup season's starting now, but it just started. So there's kind of like late November through mid-February. It's kind of just a resting time for us. Well, there's the hauling of the firewood and there's the everything, but it's resting comparatively. Adventuring, I guess, a little bit. They're good kids.
Fantastic. I'd actually like to ask you a little bit. You said that your children actually see the difference between them and the kids from the public school system. I would love to hear a little bit more about that.
I wish they were here for you to ask them.
Oh, they would give you an earful.
Yeah, I think they connect with some kids. They can talk about books they've read and that, but I think they just get a little frustrated with the behavior and some of the, I don't know, the values, I guess, that.
Well, the depth,
the things that are important to those kids are more on the surface, I think, is what they see. And so, they're talking about who likes who and the little dramas and things like that. And it's just not stuff that they deal with so much here. And it seems kind of dumb to them.
I mean, they're far from unsocialized, but they're socialized on friends that are 2 years old, and they have friends that are 85 years old. So there's a whole depth that happens for them with that breadth of people that they're associating with that they consider friends. And, our 13-year-old just did a presentation with us night before last, and she was drumming along to Shawn's songs.
And singing.
The audience is very moved. And at the end, they want to come up and say, thank you for this. And so she's standing there in that receptive hug line, and with all these strangers, just hugging strangers, saying, you're welcome. And I just don't see that ability to connect with such a broad range of people in a classroom where you're only with the kids who are your own age.
Yeah, I was a public school teacher, well, a teacher for 13 years.
Yeah.
And
Sorry.
strange environment to grow up in, where you only are allowed to interact with people in your own age group, and I think that has strange effects on people over the through those childhood years. Whereas our parents talk to us, and other people talk to us about, are your kids getting enough social time? Are they okay? But they can handle. I think the public school kids are at a deficit, not of their own fault, but just from the situation and the arrangements that they are living through.
Very, very interesting. Thank you. Krystal, so how are your kids doing with the off-grid and homesteading lifestyle that you guys have selected? Or did you select it also in conjunction with them? Because that's actually a very interesting point as well.
It's kind of evolved that way. The reason that we live where we do is because this home and this property used to belong to my parents, and when my mother passed on, it just made more sense to move here and take care of my dad. So that kind of came together when let's see, that was 6 years ago. So my teens were, my oldest was 11. Yeah. And he always thought this property was cool just because, there's sticks in the backyard and you can run around and, do more than you could do in an apartment, which is where we were previously living. My littlest, my younger kids, they don't really remember a whole lot of other places that they lived. The reason that we have the particular chickens we do is because my 9-year-old daughter picked them. She thought, these are the pretty ones, you should get these. And for a while we were talking about getting rabbits, and she really wanted a pet rabbit, and we had to kind of talk with her very frankly about so if we do get rabbits, they are going to at some point end up on our table. I just want you to fully understand the implications of this. And I was really moved by how she has this deep, abiding respect and love for animals, but she's also totally cool with eating them. And for myself, as a former vegetarian of 17 years, that was a really, that was a tough pill to swallow for me personally, but clearly my kids are way better at accepting these kinds of things. It just kind of flows for them. They're like, okay, well, we might have to eat the rooster someday. He's, not being nice to us. That's okay. So they're very comfortable with that kind of thing. My littlest, he'll watch permaculture videos with us. I remember seeing a Jamie Oliver skit somewhere about, he's asking all these school children where food comes from, and they couldn't name an eggplant and things like this. My kids all understand where this or that food item comes from, whether they're asking what tree does this grow on, or does this grow on, is this an annual or a perennial, or what animal is this? That kind of question. And my youngest will, if he finds his seeds in his apples, can we plant this? Will it come true? We've talked about, hybrids versus, cross-pollination, things like that. If he sees sprouted seeds in the compost, he'll pull them out and replant them somewhere. We have all these random plants that he's put in the ground. How Oliver must have done that. There's a random zucchini over there. Okay, he planted that. But yeah, my teens are this is cool and we like it, but also we don't really want to get our hands dirty. So there's that. My oldest has allergies. So he especially is not all that keen on helping to do anything with the homestead. But he's willing. He'll say, okay, well, I'll help you move supplies or something. He just doesn't really want to, get in there elbows deep into the dirt with us, which, you know, that's fine. Hopefully. I feel like I got off track there, but
No, that's fantastic. Thank you. Now tell me, do any of your kids, particularly the older ones that don't seem as keen on getting into the dirt as you guys are saying, is there anything that they feel that they've given up or that somehow that there's a shortcoming for them with this lifestyle choice?
I think my kids mainly they would really appreciate if we lived somewhere where they could walk to the store or like walk to see their friends, because we are kind of isolated. Like Leslie was saying that she has a great community. I am openly jealous of that. We don't have that much good community, except if we want to drive an hour or an hour and a half away, which we do quite often, but it would be nice if it was close by. And that's all. That's my teen's only complaint is, yeah, this is all great. Like, I really wish our friends weren't so far away.
Leslie, for yourself and your crew?
We have sort of the same issue. My sons, they don't think they're missing out on anything. You know, we've done scouts. They know what school is. We know school kids and stuff. So they don't feel they're missing out on that. But we do live at a point, you know, like they can't go to the neighbor's house and hang out. It's like we have to plan, okay, I have to drive you to so-and-so's house or they're coming here for a play date. So the other one is just because our community, I mean, I have a great community, but it's all not like within 10 minutes of me. We do still travel an hour sometimes. So that's my kids' big thing is that now it wasn't so bad when they were littler, but now that we're getting into those teen years where he, you know, my son's ready for some more independence and ready to get his own circle, his own social circle going, like without mom around and stuff. So that's what we're running into. But we're not that far away from things, you know. We just live outside the city that we live in. You know, we're like 10 minutes from there downtown, and things like that. So we're not terribly far that we're so out of touch. But it does take a lot of planning at this point. But luckily, his friends like computery things too, so they do communicate a lot on the computer also, thank goodness, right? So, but that's our kids' biggest complaint is the lack of independence to go out on their own to places, the movies, the store, just because it's like a 3-mile walk, 4 miles, so.
That's very interesting because mine aren't nearly that old. They're only 5 and 8, and that is also their big thing. I'm finding it fascinating, the parallel. We're not that far away either. Potentially they could be within, you know, not too long a time with everybody, but we also have to plan and it needs to be organized and we need to match schedules and driving times and what have you. So that's very interesting that they've matched up on that. Molly, Shawn, yourselves?
Yeah, so our younger ones have each other, and they get along, which I know is rare and amazing, and we are fully blessed, and we know this. Our 2 older ones can barely stand each other, and neither are super connected to the home setting. We didn't really, in fairness to them, like they're from my first marriage, both the kids, and while they lived with us pretty time teaching, in which they were invited to come but didn't want to come, the 2 older ones. So they went into the school system, and they connected to that. They did not like homeschooling. It was really hard. Introduction to homeschooling for us was not being familiar with unschooling at that time. And trying to get those 2 to work together was almost it was almost changed it for us as far as homeschooling.
Yeah, and we were outgunned because we had a lot going on with like little babies and things, and so
little babies.
And I was still working outside of the home teaching, so that it didn't work too well with them, especially where they don't get along with each other. But yeah, we went to teach in the Alaskan bush, and then so you know, and they didn't want to go there as middle school kids, but they still like to come home.
They help, you know, so like they're both in college now, and they probably, my daughter is not going to stick with college. It's not really for her, but it's really great for my son. He loves it. He's good. He's a good student. But he'll come home and he'll cut firewood. He'll operate the tractor, things that like don't have to get messy. Things with engines, things that don't have any new animal smells. But I think fully it's part of the stigma. Like he is in a business program. He sees himself as having a financial future that's like prosperous, and we have our own definition of what prosperity is, and he loves us, and he calls every day, but he just it's not where he connects. But the older daughter more and more is connecting. She still does not want to do any work at all, but she will cook for us. So we're improving. So while we're out doing the work, we come home to lots of sweets.
She likes to take selfies about some things. So she's proud of the homestead, where Jeb is kind of like, doesn't here. It's kind of like he loves us, doesn't really want people to know. I think.
Yeah, he doesn't know.
For kids, younger, they've been or they're in over who to take over when we're done with.
Yeah, we're fully.
Oh, I think we're having a little bit of audio issues with you guys again. So while maybe the internet gets stronger, I'm going to go to Krystal and I'm going to ask her a little bit about the kids and how perhaps they're making different choices about friendships and relationships based on the fact that their life that they're leading is a little bit different. Could you tell us a little bit about that, Krystal?
Well, I feel like, so I notice it the most with my middleest child because one of her best friends is her cousin who they're like cut from the same cloth kind of girls, but her cousin is public schooled. And especially when my daughter's around her and all of her public schooled friends, she comes back and she's like, I just don't like how they are. She tells me they're concerned with like what's on TV, or, they're still, they're very, very kind of shallow in what their interests are. And one of their big pastimes is to try to tease my daughter because, do you know your times tables and that kind of stuff, 9-year-old girls. And she may not know about the specific thing they're asking her, but then she'll say, I bet you don't even know what, I bet you don't even know where like a raspberry comes from or things like that. And she'll, or she's like, don't you know, like the eggs won't hatch unless they're fertilized. Like she's, but she is very discerning about who she spends her time with. And I notice, especially my teens, they really have like a handful of people. Both of my teenagers, they pretty much have their one favorite person, and they're not really worried about, connections beyond that. They're not interested in having this very, very broad but shallow social network. They want to go deep with one person, and that seems to be really working for them. When they were a bit younger, I was like, oh gosh, they need more friends, but I think they're okay. I think they're probably better off than I was at their age.
Well, they certainly sound like they're very strong and very clear on what they want. So that's a very wonderful thing. Now, I want to go to Philip because in a way he gives us the opposite perspective, because Philip, you actually were a homeschooler and then you made the choice on your own to be pursuing this type of life. So I'm curious what parallels you see from your perspective between homeschooling and a broad, open type of education and now making the life choices that you've been making.
Yeah, I think when you're homeschooled, and, I think my parents got a lot of, their friends were just kind of like, oh, okay, so you're not going to send your kids to school. Okay. and they were friends. And I remember like hearing those kind of conversations being really young. And, so they definitely were going against the norm. And I think it's kind of like when you're little, it's, monkey see, monkey do. You see your parents kind of going one way and everyone else going another way. And we weren't big TV watchers. My mom grew up on a 200-acre beef cattle farm, and so we spent a lot of time there, because my dad was a teacher, and then my mom homeschooled us, so he had a lot of downtime, and like, summer break. He didn't work summers, so we were able to spend a lot of time at the farm. So I already got exposed to kind of that different way of life of, they had a freshwater spring, they butchered hogs. They had a 5-acre garden. So, I've been, helping can since I was, as long as I can remember, basically helping garden. So even though it was almost like not on my radar as like a hobby, I just knew that was a way you could, do, food and live a life. And, I saw that. And, even though we lived in the city, we got exposed to kind of that. And being homeschooled, there was a lot of time to spend there and see a different way of life. And I really connected with that always as a kid, with the farming and the gardening. And I mean, the food quality, I think that was something that I always really picked up on when you grew your own food and, and canned it. Just, you can't beat that quality that you get with that when you're taking care of it and growing the food with love and really seeing how it happens and making mistakes and be like, okay, this isn't good. And so, yeah, I just feel like, being homeschooled, you get an opportunity to see different kinds of life. And I can credit my parents for that and, exposing me to, different ideas, I guess, and thinking outside the box, even though, their life is very different than my life, how it looks, at them at 30 compared to me at 30. It's very different, but I think they really did open that door to thinking outside the box and not feeling the pressure to go along with, the mainstream. And I think a lot of this is kind of mainstream, though, because I don't even really feel like I'm, that different. I mean, a lot of people are talking about homesteading. A lot of people are talking about gardening. Like, it's becoming more of a thing with the internet. And it's funny because, your peers and friends, are starting, some I even see starting to do little things like even just, having a couple plants, in pots and asking questions about the chickens since it's a new thing. Me and my wife have been getting all sorts of questions. It's funny how Krystal said, about the, how, that, a rooster has to fertilize an egg for, be other chickens or whatever. And we keep getting questions about that because people, they have no idea like how that all works, adults. And it's crazy. But, when you're not exposed to that, and like Krystal was saying with her kids, you only have so much time to learn in a day. And so, what do you want to learn? What's the most important thing you want to learn with your time? I think being homeschooled, you can really start to hone in on that and decide what you want to educate yourself in and what's important to have knowledge in. If that answers your question at all.
No, that certainly answers the question. And I think it's very interesting from the perspective of us as parents to actually look at your vision of this as a homeschooler. Now, in that regard, I'm interested if any of you have ever heard your kids explain to somebody who doesn't know what homesteading or living off-grid is about, and if you've ever heard them give an explanation of how they see their life that they're leading to somebody who doesn't live that kind of life. No time where you've actually maybe introduced your kids to a new friend and they say, well, how do you guys live? And what do you mean you don't go to school? And what do you mean you don't go to the grocery store? And what do you mean you've got chickens? How do your kids respond?
I think for my kids, it's mostly the question. Oh, go ahead. I was going to say with my kids, it's the homeschool question is the one we get the most. Like I said, everyone around here has chickens. Most of them are 4-H'ers with horses and cows and stuff. So that part isn't really unusual. It's the homeschooling part where, when we do go get supplies, in the morning and I have all my kids with me and people are like, oh, so why aren't you guys in school? And they used to go, well, because we're unschooled, and that just led the glaze over people's eyes at that point was like, what? Unschool? What are you talking about? And so I had to explain, just tell me homeschool and we're good with that. But the question more is on our education choices rather than our food choices and our gardening choices. So that's really the one that's kind of funny, the questions of, what grade are you in? And they all look at me like, what do we say? And I'm like, I don't know, guess. And so, my 13-year-old will tell people he's in 4th grade just to shake their cage a little bit. And we get lots of the socialization questions like, oh, how do you socialize them? And I'm like, we go out in the real world and we have friends. How do you socialize? So those are our biggest questions when it comes to our lifestyle.
Wow, that's interesting that homeschooling would actually be more of a challenge for folks than living off grid and doing your own food. That's very, very interesting. I want to go to Molly and Shawn on that question.
Yeah, sure. So our kids are a little older, and we got a lot of those same comments and questions that Leslie's talking about when they were younger, and what Krystal mentioned too, like, do you know your times tables and all of that kind of rigmarole. And now they're old, and we just let them fend for themselves. So it's interesting. What comes to mind is on this recent flight we had, we didn't pay for our seats. So we all got middle seats on a red-eye flight, all separate from each other. I was sitting in front of my 13-year-old so I could hear her, but she was sitting with strangers. And there's a red eye, so I'm sure the man wanted to sleep, but she talked his ear off and, said, I'm homeschooled, and these are the things I believe in, and this is the work I'm doing, and my parents went to Standing Rock, and la, 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 just on. And I kind of just was thinking, oh, this poor man, but he kept asking questions, and he didn't come from the same perspective as we do. He was conservative. He had sort of kind of heard of Standing Rock. And he had a lot of questions about being homeschooled and about being off grid and about music and the kinds of things we grew in our gardens. And she answered them fluently and made a connection. And I thought, like, that's what it's all about. Like, we can have these connected lives, and our children are connected enough to reach across a divide and share that with somebody who doesn't have the same perspective in a confident way. And that's pretty special.
Yeah, that's real special, similar to us. It's like we are here. And it's really fun to hear each other's stories. But when you come into contact with people who have no idea about this kind of thing, it's really an opportunity to open someone's eyes. And it was fun hearing about, I didn't get to hear the conversation, but hearing about Maisie being able to do that. And I'm sure you've all had this similar experiences with your family. Like my dad's really conservative. Molly's dad is too. But after we've been doing this for a number of years, he started to see from and his other grandchildren, like our nieces and nephews and that sort of thing. And he came and got serious and so like, oh, you were crazy when you were starting out to do this, but he's like, I'm starting to understand. I think I get it now. I think you're doing it right. Keep up the good work.
Wow, that's very interesting. Thank you for that. I actually have a friend around here who's also a homeschooler, and she says that the grandparents, they say, we don't really like the homeschool thing, but we like what we're seeing. So I think that tends to happen a lot with the grandparents and that generation. I actually got a comment here from Krystal about technology, which I think is very interesting because I'll tell you a little bit about my husband's family. They're from a very small town here in Mexico. And they actually still recall the first time that ice came to town. And they recall the first time that the radio came into their region and how they would all gather into the one house that had a radio. And they tell these fantastic and amazing stories. And so obviously for them, technology and progress are two things that are intimately linked together. And so when my husband said that he was going to build a house in the jungle, my mother-in-law's first words, well, why would you want to go backwards like that? And of course, their house has a TV going 24/7 because for them that was progress and that was improvement and that was becoming more urbanized. And so we don't have television for our kids. And this does absolutely make a bit of a shock because why are we choosing to go in a direction that they see as backwards? Now, Krystal, she sent me a comment here that sometimes in this regard, we're kind of looking one generation further back. I'd love to get a little bit more from you on this, Krystal.
Well, my parents were older when I was born. They were 43 and 45 when I was born. I'm the only child of only children, so I don't have a lot of family history or anything like that. But yeah, I remember my mother telling me like, oh, we would get the ice block in our fridge every week, that kind of thing. I was not breastfed because formula was progress. And so when I breastfed my own children, it was like, oh, why would you do that? Things like that. And so now, it's been really, I think, fun and entertaining all around because my dad is 79 and he does live with us. And so like we ordered a beehive. We're getting bees this summer, this spring. So we're really excited about that. And he's looking at the beehive gear in the mail and he says, what, do you just want to do everything yourselves? You don't want to buy anything at the store? And I was like, that would be great. Yeah, that's kind of where we're going actually. And he's like, but you could just buy it. I'm like, but we could make it with our own hands and we could grow the flowers for the bees to eat. And like, that would just, that's fulfilling in a way that, and he thinks back and he'll mention things like, yeah, when I was like 7 and my grandparents and I used to go out with them and milk the cows. And I think he's finally starting to like understand that we want this, deeper something that I think maybe he's realizing his generation, gave up like quite happily, ran away from it because everything could be improved with technology. I grew up on TV dinners and everything out of a can because that was a sign of progress. That was a sign of financial success. You wouldn't, you don't have to grow a garden. You can buy food at the store. It's better. It's, more successful. So, but I think he's finally starting to realize, like, we'll show him like, oh, look at this radish we grew. It's like the size of our forearm. And he's like, huh, looks pretty good. So.
Fantastic. Yes, I think we're certainly seeing some parallels like that with my in-laws. When I actually get them talking about what we're doing on our grounds, and all of a sudden my mother-in-law will break into a story of how when they were making their pillows, there's a tree around here called the seva tree. And once in the year when it sprouts, it has these huge seed pods. And when they open up, it's actually very similar to cotton. So they would go and they would pick the seed pods and they'd make their own pillows. And so we're starting finally to hear these stories from my parents-in-laws, and they're sharing them with the grandkids, which is really very, very nice to finally be seeing. We're going to take a short break, and we're actually going to watch a video about a family in northern Canada who's homesteading and homeschooling and spending time on the land. And then we will be back to continue on with the conversation.
It started with the Freedom 35 plan. It wasn't about getting rich. It was about needing less money. It was about owning our own land, but being debt-free. And now, we spend way less time working and way more time doing whatever we want.
We'd lived off-grid before and loved it. We knew that it was the best way to live cheap and be surrounded by forests, rivers, and mountains. Back in 2011, we bought a beautiful forested 40-acre piece of land in northern British Columbia, and the land is a lot of fun. It also provides us with all of our electricity, heat, water, and most of our food. I'm just about ready to plant carrots in my straw bale gardens. I love straw bale gardening. It's so easy. You just sprinkle a little dirt on top and plant your seeds in. No weeding. It's awesome.
To keep our house debt-free, we built it small and simple. We placed the cedar post directly into the ground like a pole barn, so there was no need for excavation or a concrete foundation. We used locally milled timbers and log rafters that we cut ourselves. The whole house was wrapped with plywood and then foam insulation with a couple giant south-facing windows. It has board and batten siding and a living roof. The whole thing cost less than 25 grand. This is our little off-grid house we built. Come check it out. It's small, it's about 900 square feet. And so with 7 of us, we're making the best of a small space. Here's our entryway. So this is our living room, and our kitchen, and our dining room, and our schoolroom. We've got some really nice big south-facing windows. So in the winter time and spring and fall, we get lots of sun in here. And in the summertime, the sun's high enough that it doesn't get too hot in here. Here's our main wood stove. It's a Blaze King catalytic stove. It's super efficient, and it's right in the center of the house. This is how we heat up water for a lot of things, either dishes or showers, or we can put a kettle on here to make some tea. So here's our giant multi-purpose table. It's for eating and preparing food, but also for homeschooling and whatever else. Here is the girls' room. It's about 7 feet by 7 feet, which is perfect to build in 2 single beds. So this is for the older girls. Master bedroom. Nothing too fancy here. The last room in this mansion is the little girl's room. So this thing's 16 feet long and about 7 feet wide in here. And so we got a queen size bed. And we got 2 like little, they're kind of like mini single beds. We first started collecting rainwater off our woodshed roof and now off our shop roof. We have 900 gallons of water storage underneath the shop floor where it stays cold. The whole system cost $1,000 compared to about $20,000 for a well. The house isn't plumbed, so we collect the water from the shop and carry it to the house in buckets. And because we don't have running water, we don't generate a lot of wastewater. The kitchen sink and the shower empty into a shallow drainage field in the backyard. The Berkey is awesome. This thing is a passive water filter. So you can pour whatever water you want in the top here, and it's just got ceramic filters in there. They're like 0.1 thousandths of a micron or something like that. So it'll get rid of any suspended solids, but also a lot of bacteria and all that bad stuff. So pour it in here, and hours later, this thing slowly fills up. For showers, we can heat up a bucket like this on the wood stove or the wood cook stove. And this is like the only running water in the house. It's kind of running. There's a pump here, pump and a switch, and it'll pump the water up to that tank up there. And the tank comes out through a nozzle in the shower. So it's kind of like a one-time use situation. You fill it up, you drain it all, and you fill it up again next time. So the bathroom's pretty standard composting toilet, bucket style, very, very simple. It's a regular toilet seat. It looks all pretty normal, except in there, instead of water, there's just a pile of sawdust. And after every time you use it, you put in more sawdust. Electricity is no problem at all. We started off with a single solar panel and a simple RV system. This feeds the house with 12 volts for LED lighting, phone chargers, and a music player. After a couple years, we invested in a 2.5 kilowatt system that allows us to run a deep freeze, a fridge, a washing machine, and pretty well anything else we want. The system has an excess of power most of the year. Only during prolonged snowy or cloudy periods in the winter do we have to run a backup generator. The Jenny runs less than 40 hours a year. Under here is our little 12 volt system to power the house. Underneath the bread basket, we got the batteries, and we have an AC charger, so if we ever have to run a generator, we can charge batteries through this guy. This is our solar charger, which is running all the time. Blinking green means it's charging right now. Just some various breakers. And this guy's the battery monitor, 99% charged, it says. And it's 99% charged or better 8 months out of the year. In the wintertime, it can get a little sketchy. Okay, we've got these 2 new lithium-ion batteries. They're lithium ferrous phosphate. And they are replacing this whole huge bank of lead-acid batteries. We've been running on these for a few years now. We just got these ones, bolted them to the wall. We cut over to those. We've been using them for a couple months. And now we found a new home for these batteries. This is a super old cook stove. Little firebox in here. And it quickly gets up to temperature for the oven. And a warming shelf up here.
The cook stove is awesome for cooking and baking. The girls and I have mastered the cook stove, and along with some cast iron pots and pans, we can make anything, including pies, cakes, croissants.
Now this, Rose's sink, this is a trick sink. See, what you can do here that you can't do in a normal house is you can turn on the tap and nothing will happen. It's very special. Anyways, it's just a sink. So we got to pour water in there from a bucket, but the drain does work. And we have a gray water system out behind the house. So Rose's kitchen is a bit small for the amount of people she feeds, but she does a great job. Her mixer is pretty nice to have. And really, because it only runs a couple minutes a day and it's really only a couple hundred watts, it doesn't really, there's no issue with it in the solar system. Same thing with the blender, that's no problem. The toaster, however, is a seasonal appliance. In the wintertime, it's off limits. It's just too much power. Okay, fridge. It's a normal fridge. And this is the reason why we have the big solar system in the shop, is so that we can run the fridge and the deep freeze. Living off-grid for us includes a few different types of chores. We carry water into the house, we empty compost buckets, we collect firewood, but our biggest challenge here is just maintaining our road in the winter. We often get 5 to 6 feet of snow, and we clear about 8 kilometers to the nearest maintained road. Homeschooling is both a requirement and our preference out here. The kids only take about 2 to 3 hours a day to complete their regular studies. We want to make sure that they can transition to university, but at the same time, our main goal is to ensure that they learn in everything they do. We don't want to focus on pure academics. We want them to learn to be great people with broad and varied life experiences.
The girls love to ride horses, and they're always riding horses or otherwise spending time with them. And Sarah, our oldest, keeps bees. There's always something to do around here. We love to go down to the river to fish or to swim. We like to go for walks, either hunting or gathering or just exploring. We love it out here.
And we can't go back. Gridlessness is too good.
Welcome back to our conversation. That was a fantastic video that gives everybody a good idea, everybody who's not living off grid and not doing the homesteading, of what this life can eventually be like. I think that this is a family who certainly has everything, well, it seems very wrapped up. And actually, when we were talking about the video while everybody was watching it, Philip had some comments he wanted to make about his impression when he first saw the video.
Yeah, no, it was just, it was impressive how well thought out and organized everything was. And, it's funny. It's right away you just see that they're sharp people, and a really well thought out plan. And I feel like it's funny when I first started reading about, homesteading in off-grid living, you read it and you're like, okay, yeah, I could do that, and you watch videos, you're like, yeah, I can do that. And then you start to do it and working a job and family life and friends. And it's a huge, time commitment. You really start to see, these people in the video, it's their life. They're really dedicated to it. And it's, and it's neat to see people on that level and to, my little role in that. Right away, I was just thinking about that. It's just, like, we just made a chicken coop and we made it out of scrap wood. But, two friends came over and, we had, all the tools out and we're like talking about designs. And so, we're still out there for like 2 hours, 3 people for 2 hours just to make a small chicken coop, for one chicken. It's like, so it's a lot of work to do this stuff and a lot of thinking and, it's that's really what I picked up from the video is just them seeing them overcoming these challenges, and it's just it's their whole life. Pretty neat.
Yeah, it's certainly, once you look at how it eventually pans out, if you take things to the full extent of what they can be, it definitely challenges a lot of what we've grown accustomed in our society to think is the ultimate of what we need to work towards. And actually, it's very interesting how you talked about that, because a lot of what apparently for you, and as we were talking while the video was going on, for a lot of us, starting on this lifestyle had a lot to do with technology, which is an interesting turnaround and a circling back because we're kind of going off technology in some ways. I talked about not being on TV. We've talked about getting our hands in the dirt. And so now in a way, we have this interesting situation where, yes, we're going off grid. Yes, we're doing homesteading, but technology is still an important part of what we're doing. I don't know who wants to speak to that, but yeah, integrating technology and yet going back in the way that things used to be done before at the same time makes for an interesting mix.
I mean, technology is how I found out about this. So I think, really started to dig in and learn. And, I finally got a book on homesteading just, and I was even thinking if I ever really got off grid and didn't have internet or something, it would be good to have a nice reference book because, you don't need the internet or any technology to read a book during the day. But, I've watched so many YouTube videos on permaculture and just gardening. I remember I was having a hard time with my tomatoes. And, I would get a few, but, and I was like, okay, and, what am I doing wrong? And I was watching this one video and they were talking about, self-pollinating the tomato flowers. And that there's the male part is in the flower, but it just needs to be, moved around so that the pollen falls into the female part. And I'm just like, it was like a light bulb, but that was from a YouTube video. And so, technology is huge, I think, and very important.
Well, on that note, I'm actually curious who you guys all look to for information, because in a way we're all inventing things. And yes, some of you guys had some experience having a family background in farming or horses, but in many ways we're inventing something that's completely new. This is a new hybrid and there's no necessarily clear roadmap anywhere. So I'm wondering who inspires you, who you look to. Is it just a broad sampling of whatever comes up on YouTube, or are there sources specifically like Krystal's actually working for what was it, the Homesteader Guru webpage? Tell us a little bit about that.
The Homestead Guru is actually just a blog project of some awesome friends of mine that seems, they're headed toward that kind of sustainable lifestyle in all aspects. And so they've got a really good blog following, which is fantastic. But lots of people I follow, or my husband's are really, we're a good mix because I'm really a reader and more along the lines of traditional education, and he is very much show me, tell me. He wants to watch the videos. So great resources for us have been obviously Jeff Lawton, Bill Mollison, two of the founders of permaculture. There's also a guy called John Kohler, growingyourgreens.com. He has a YouTube channel that is brilliant. There's Matt Powers. There's lots of people on YouTube that are just really, really good resources. There's a family with 4 little kids that they've been doing farming, and now they're like converting a school bus because they want to like go find their perfect property, their ideal property. So they're going to do the converted school bus RV thing to find the property. And so you can follow their whole journey about like outfitting the bus and how they feed their animals and everything in between. It's really, really great. I feel like before the internet, all this kind of stuff you might hear in theory, but now it's like you can have snapshots into people's daily lives into what this looks like, and it's connecting so many people. I mean, I'm in so many Facebook groups about permaculture, about gardening, about Texas gardening, about organic gardening, about polyface farming, in other words, where the rotational grazing, so it's more natural for the land. There's so many concepts out there that how would we have found out about this stuff if it wasn't for the internet? So
in that regard, is it important for us who are already doing this to be putting things up on the internet? Is that part and parcel of an integrated community that's doing this now?
I personally think so. As much as I have a bit of a ridiculous aversion to wanting to share my own stuff on video, I do try to take pictures and share on Instagram and share a lot about just what we're doing day to day, because it's the simple things and the willingness to persist. I feel like one of the downsides of technology is, for instance, you can, if you know how to do it, you can throw up an entire website in like a day and a half, versus with something like gardening, you've got to be willing to go out there and check on your seeds. You have to like mist them so that they're not going to dry out, because you can't just go, okay, I planted all the seeds, I'm done, I don't have to think about it again until I harvest. It's not that way. So it invites us to be more present and mindful consistently than say, okay, I'm going to do all the things at once. Gardening doesn't really appreciate that, and neither do things like chickens. They like to be fed every day. And
Well, Krystal, actually, that's very interesting, because I wanted to jump from what we're doing with the permaculture and the homesteading and the off-gridness back to the education. And I want to ask you guys what values you think that you're implicitly passing on to your kids because of the lifestyles that you have chosen with the off-grid and with the homesteading lifestyle. So a little bit like what you're talking about with the seeds. You can't just put it up and there it's done. It actually takes a different type of time is involved, a different type of outlook. So I'm really curious what values you think are implicit in your lifestyle choices that are being handed down, which are different than if you were doing the homeschool in an apartment in an urban area.
Well, I guess some of the things that we are hopefully teaching our children is this self-reliance, patience, the ability to watch and nurture a particular thing grow over a season or over a time, to really connect, helping them learn to really connect to their environment and how they affect it and how their environment affects them. But really a lot of self-reliance, a lot of responsibility out here. And I'm not going to say that if you live in the apartments or the urban way or the urban setting that you can't teach your children those things, but there is definitely in this lifestyle of having to wait, of having that patience, of having that self-reliance to know that we have to get wood or we're going to be cold, that there is that what's the word I'm looking for, that if you don't do it, there are consequences for it, that, and being connected exactly to how their actions affect their life from their food choices, and being able to say, I made that choice, and being held responsible for those is really kind of the things that we're hoping to, and for the relationships, I think a lot of times too, and I think we talked about this a bit, is that in this lifestyle is building those family relationships back and forth with our kids. My kids have to learn to be in relationship with their siblings and with me in this situation, just because they don't go away from us and we are with them all the time. And so that is another thing that we really emphasize when we're here in our home, is not just our relationships with the land, but our relationships with each other.
Very interesting. We're going to then go to Molly and Shawn if they've got their audio. Yes? Up? No?
No, we're here.
Wonderful.
I'll go first. And okay. So I guess the messages that I see our girls carrying forward are to care for the earth and to be connected in a heart-centered way to themselves and to their broader community. You want to say something, Shawn?
I think another thing that they pick up, or maybe they haven't verbalized it so much, but ties back into some of our earlier conversations, is that really is valuing that doing things the hard way is okay, and there's value in that. Hard work, just having a good work ethic and being okay to work harder, doing things a harder way, even though there's an option to do it much easier. Like you were saying, you could go buy a granola bar, or you could raise the oats and harvest them and collect the honey and get stung by bees and all this stuff to eventually end up with a granola bar. And there's so many values that come out of that. It's hard to name them all, but it's connectedness to yourself and to your community, to your resources. I think it'd be really, really important for individuals throughout the world to be more intimately connected to their resources.
Fantastic. Krystal, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think that my kids are, they have a lot more appreciation about where our food comes from, and even things like just, where money or anything comes from, just our resources. I feel like they have a better understanding about, this took some work. It didn't just show up magically on our, doorstep. Effort was required to get these things that we're enjoying. For instance, we make salsa. It might not be our homegrown tomatoes all the time, but we make salsa from scratch. And our tacos taste so much better, and they notice, for instance, they notice in their friends that they don't have an appreciation about, this food, some effort was required to make it, and they're not really, they don't take it for granted as much, I think. And I think and they're learning too. I think unschooling in general is relationship-based education. I've always felt like my own education was very focused on academics to the exclusion of perhaps other things that would have benefited me much more, like understanding how to treat people and the value of effort or hard work, those kind of things. And I think my kids understand the relationships. Even my littlest one will tell us, permaculture means earth care, people care, and return of surplus. He understands those things. And he understands why it's important to care for the earth, why it's important to care for people, because what else is there ultimately? when it comes right down to it, what are, nothing else really matters except for those things, like people and the planet that we live on and the relationships that we have with the land, with the trees, with the animals, with the plants, with each other. And I think that is infinitely more important than how to write a good essay or, I think that those are the kind of things that they're learning. And that stuff, not that it's not important, but that we'll get to that when we've got the other stuff in place.
Beautiful. I mean, I know that for us, a lot of what has been very interesting is the fact that my kids are aware that they are, or we as a family are 100% responsible for what we put in and what we get out. And so it includes everything from the fact that they think it's weird to get an electrical bill to the fact that ultimately we're responsible for the waste that we put out on our land. And so the drainage isn't the government's job. It's our own job, and we have to make sure that it's done responsibly so we don't pollute our own land. And so it makes for the circular understanding of the entire system that they're living in, which I think makes us more responsible for our acts on a day-to-day basis. And I think that that's something that I think a lot of us could use a little more of, because we're used to letting the state take care of things, or the police take care of things, or the health system take care of things. Or of course, everybody here is all involved with unschooling, the education system. Let them take care of things. And in this way, I think that when the kids are living a life where they know that the family is 100% responsible, if something doesn't work, you don't call the electrical company, you go, you fix it. If you don't do your work, there's no salsa on the table. So it makes you a lot more responsible in a way that I think our society has led away from. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts in that regard.
No, I think, yeah, that's a good point, and kind of a point everyone's been talking about is when you, it's good. I've seen it with kids, friends' kids, and, when you show them how things work, they want to know, you know what I mean? And I feel like in a lot of mainstream society, there's a lot of, there's so much focus on, education and college and degrees and diplomas and things like that, instead of, treating people well and treating, the earth well, because the earth is a resource. That's how we survive. And if that's not on your radar as a kid, you know what I mean? It's not there. You've never thought about it if no one's told you to think about that, you guys as parents or teachers, me as a friend, to anyone younger than me, it's you're a teacher, you're there to, help younger people, learn about life and what's really important. And I wasn't always there, you know what I mean? I lived a much more mainstream life, 10 years ago than I do now. And I think, but I wasn't happy. I was pursuing a much more empty life, I think.
Well, and it is kind of interesting too, because I grew up very mainstream also. I went to public schools. I have a college education, hey, get a job, have a family, live life. And so it's really interesting that this journey that I'm going through with my children and unschooling and teaching them that compassion and that relationship with the family and our land and the people around them is actually something I'm learning myself at the same time. I am going through that same journey of learning to be more compassionate and to be really mindful of my relationships with my friends, with my husband, with them. And I'm learning and growing along the way too. I mean, I am not the same person I was at the start of this journey. And I'm continually growing and helping my children grow in that same aspect. So they can actually see me struggling with the things that they would struggle with. And for me to go, I really struggle with it too. I'm not perfect. And I have to learn these things and say the I'm sorries and go back and do that journal writing and do that creative outlet so that I can get back to a good place and we can deal with this. So it's really a learning journey, not just for my children and unschooling, but for me and my husband too.
Yeah, I quite agree. I feel like I was raised to think that my parents had all the answers and that adults in general had all the answers. And so I have always strived, partially because I felt like it was important for them to know, and also because I just couldn't hide the fact that, hey, I don't have all the answers. I don't. And I'm learning alongside all of them. Sometimes when people ask, like when kids will say, what's permaculture? What are you guys doing? Like our kids' friends will come over. My husband says it's how to be a good human. We're learning how to be good humans, which is really kind of the truth of it. And it is an ongoing process. I mean, for instance, for the longest time, I was so embarrassed that we didn't recycle because we don't have pickup. Like all our friends who are good humans and recycle, they all have curbside pickup because they live in the city. And now we compost. And so we're figuring it out as we go. It's one little way. But yeah, I think we're all, it's important, I think, that our kids are able to see that, yes, we are all learning. Just because you get to some magical adulthood age doesn't mean that you've got it all figured out. Oh, gosh, no.
Molly, Shawn, do you have something that you'd like to add to that? No, I think we're having some sound issues again with you guys. Oh, there you are.
I'm not sure. We're here. We just don't know what to say. I mean,
if you don't mind, I'd like to circle back to the technology. We didn't get to weigh in on that. And it kind of connects to this a little bit too. I think it's being in Maine's a little bit, we're in rural Maine. Much of Maine is rural. We both grew up with families that hunted and fished, and we raised pigs for meat. We weren't homesteaders. We weren't environmentalists. But I knew every tree by, what kind of tree it was, and I knew what birds came to the feeder. And I think in general, rural living affords a different type of connectivity to your landscape. And it's not uncommon for people to homestead here. It's not uncommon to be on grid and have chickens and pigs in their backyard. We have very few cities, so it's really a way of life that's works together with your neighborhood. So for us, there wasn't I think there wasn't a big need for technology to get us into homesteading. We were already there. We grew up there, and it was just becoming aware of our responsibility to be good stewards to the earth, and to be able to walk our talk. So if we're going to talk about environmentalism, we're going to talk about being good humans, then we need to show up for that. And so when we were able to align our moral state of being with how we lived, and that's continual. So yeah, we're off grid, and what we tell people when we educate is that we all have to keep moving. Like, we don't get to stop thinking about how we live in a better way because we're already off grid, because we already have an organic farm, because we already grow most of our own food. We don't get to stop improving. Nobody gets to stop improving. So we have to keep moving forward. And we tell the kids this too, like, we don't get to stop. We have to eliminate what we're buying. We have to eliminate plastic from our lives. We have to change how we do transportation. So we have to keep pushing forward, and that makes room for other people to make their small steps forward too. So I just kind of wanted to circle back because, yeah, technology is a part of it. We certainly use Grandma Google to look for some recipes, or when we started fermenting, like, how do you do this? There was nobody to teach us, and I definitely don't know how to knit. So if I decide to, I'm going to Google. But technology seems less important to us coming from a rural landscape. So I just kind of wanted to throw that in there.
And I'd also like to say that coming from, the other thing about Maine is that historically there's a lot of resource-based aspects to our economy. And so people have lived for a long, long time here. For the entire history of the state, really, a lot of people have lived connected to the natural world in some way through fishing and logging and the abundant recreation. And I think that ties back to what we're talking about with people being connected to their resources. You know, so many people live in a way that the food comes from the grocery store and the waste is removed, and we never have to see where that happens. And the shoes we buy, you know, the materials were taken from another country somewhere thousands of miles away. We don't have to see the damage caused by that aspect of our economy. And what we're dealing with is globalization, and the opposite of that is localization. So the more we can localize ourselves and become intimately related to our resources and how we use them, and what our waste disposal looks like, and the closer that is to our own homes and our own lives, the more we're going to live in balance with the natural world, and we'll be better humans.
Thank you. That's actually very, very interesting and very close to what my thinking was on all of that. Now, on that note, I want to flip a little bit to something that's very interesting in the education circles, which is critical thinking and how you foment that. And I want to ask you guys if you think the very fact of how you're choosing to live your lives forces somehow that critical thinking in your kids. And if you want, Shawn and Molly, you guys are smiling when I said that, so something went through your minds with that. Do you want to start the conversation?
I'm smiling because the friend who was writing to me, and she'll be listening right now, just told me she could teach me how to knit, so I don't need to consult Google. So I'm all set with the knitting. Nobody needs to worry. What do you think about that question?
You distracted me, and I don't remember the question.
Well, let me go back to the question then. The question is, does the fact of living off grid or homesteading in a way foment critical thought in your kids implicitly?
Oh, I believe it does, because every day is different, and so you can't fall into routines and that sort of thing. And each day we have to figure out, you know, what's the emergency we need to take care of? The goats just broke out of the fence. I guess we need to take care of that. How are we going to fix it so they don't do that again? And it's a constant, ever-changing, evolving, what's the day going to be like today? And it's all about problem solving and making things work in a way that's reasonably efficient and ecological.
And I think coming into a real respect for our children as people who are part of this landscape, who have knowledge that maybe we don't have, who are eyes on the ground that we don't have. And I'm going to put Shawn on the spot a little bit, because this morning, usually he does the morning farm chores and the girls do the evening farm chores. But this morning, he asked the girls to do the morning farm chores. And our daughter came in and said, "Dad, it's too icy to bring the horses down to the pasture." And he just did not listen, because he thought she was trying to get out of the chores. And when she finally convinced him to go outside, it wasn't safe to bring the horses down to pasture. So, you know, and usually we're really right in tune with respecting what their eyes on the ground are.
Yeah, I treated her like a kid instead of like a person.
Yeah, I
guess is a way to say that, because people tend to treat children differently and dismiss them, and I was guilty today. I did that. I'll try harder.
Yeah, so, but I think that they have a wisdom about, that's a problem-solving wisdom, that is a learning by doing and seeing and experiencing wisdom that is kind of scarce in the world, and it's beautiful to see it coming up in our children.
Leslie, do you want to add something to that?
Well, I was just going to say, you know, when you say critical thinking and things, and all I can remember is reading stories or probably geometry or something, but it was all book work, and I sat on my thumb and thought about it. So, you know, problem thinking, and there's a time and place for that, but my children actually, for their critical thinking, get to put their ideas in motion right then and there and learn immediately whether A works, B works, or C works, and be able to problem solve at that point. So because our education doesn't happen from necessarily books all the time or just from being seated in a classroom and listening. They actually get the hands-on experience of learning critically, hands-on wise, that they can make their mistakes. And in our home, we kind of are like, yay, a mistake, you are learning. So it's kind of nice that they can actually put their hands on, critically think them out, and do them in a real world sort of situation. I mean, reading, that Susie has some grapefruits in a book isn't teaching me how that applies to my real life. But when my kids have to figure out that, the middle child can't carry the 5-gallon bucket, how are we all going to work together to get down there? So there's more even aspects of just the critical thinking, but that relationship building and hands-on doing it and being in that sort of, situation of real life instead of, well, this could happen and this is probably how you should think about it.
Yeah, I think that a lot of modern education is it's done in a very kind of like antiseptic, risk-free kind of way. There's a lot of theoretical learning that takes place. Like I'm reminded of Sheldon on Big Bang Theory trying to read a book about how to swim. I was definitely that kind of kid. If I can't get it out of a book, well, trying it just seems way too risky. I don't know. My kids are growing up very differently in that way. They do have not only the freedom and the time freedom, the physical freedom, and also the time freedom to be able to experiment. But they're used to having the adults in their life trust them to make responsible decisions. They're used to being having someone help to troubleshoot their ideas with them, as opposed to going, don't do that, or wait for an adult to help you, or things like that. So I think my kids have much more common sense than perhaps kids who are only ever exposed to certain ideas in a classroom or on a worksheet.
Now tell me how you think that things change for them, and the fact that if they ever watch TV, their life is very rarely going to be pictured as they're living it. How does that make them think differently about their world? Anybody jump in.
My kids have had experiences before watching things like, the Disney Channel or whatever. And I used to be, when my kids were younger, when my teens were younger, I had a lot of misgivings about, oh gosh, I shouldn't let them watch TV. TV's bad. I've kind of come full circle, because I've seen that they will watch these shows and they will go, this is so weird. Why are the kids acting that way? Or why do they care about that? That's stupid. Or, why wouldn't they just do X instead? And so it's very interesting to see their take on it. And I think maybe even a lot of things like programming that's specifically aimed at kids, my kids find really inane. They're looking for something a little more deep and complex with that. And I've heard conversations, for instance, with back to my 9-year-old and her public school cousin. I've heard her exasperatedly saying, you don't have to believe everything you see on TV, that kind of thing. So.
Interesting. Now, I'm curious if you guys have any aha moments where you've said, well, now this is a turning point in your journey that you've had, either with your children or in your homesteading, in the educational unschooling part, where something's all of a sudden clicked and you've said, I'm on the right track. Okay, we're going to go to Molly.
So we had an experience this fall. Our oldest our oldest at home, 13-year-old, had expressed some interest in being publicly schooled for high school. So we told her that she could go in for 8th grade if she, made some efforts to kind of like line up with the school curriculum a little bit, like not like overly crazy, but we wanted her to have some specific writing skills if she and to get up on time.
Yeah, that was a good one.
And so we talked about it, and we ordered a nice book, a really great book if you're into homeschooling, that had different types of writing and the how to kind of like really let her through, and then allowed for a lot of creative writing in it, and like in a weekly format. And I would have loved it. And but slowly she started to kind of like lie a little about her work and resist and
put it off.
Yeah. And then over time we started seeing her kind of break a little, like her spirit. And she wasn't doing that creative writing she wanted to do. She wasn't journaling. She was just kind of like hating writing all of a sudden. And just because she had to learn how to write an expository essay, it was like the end of the world for her. And it kind of really was an aha moment for us as far as unschooling. We decided to just take a risk, to let go more. And it was an evolving conversation with her. Like, we feel like we can't, having been teachers and knowing how complex the classroom is in a public school, in good faith, just send you in without these skills, but it's your choice, totally your choice. And she said, yeah, I'm not ready. I don't want to do this type of learning this year. Maybe I'll decide later differently. But just seeing the way that a kid can break when they're pressured into something was heartbreaking. And I mean,
yeah, whether she just didn't want to do it or didn't like get it, or she wasn't ready for it, whatever it was, she was luckily able to make the choice to say, I kind of want to go to school to be around my friends, but it's not worth having to do this. And so I'm going to continue to do the work that I like to do and I'm interested in, and move on from there.
But for us, or for me in particular, it was really like a step further into unschooling, to say, I'm really going to trust this child and her direction, and believe that it's all going to be okay. So it's not going to need anything. She doesn't need to learn these skills. Like, she will figure this out because that's her choice and her path. And so, we're there, but this was just like one more, like, yeah, we're really there now. Like, we're really like, whatever. And so that's kind of our big thing, was just that spirit breaking.
Yeah. For me, I guess I feel like with unschooling, a lot of the rewards you reap, it takes a while to see them. I feel like we lose so many people in the, they're like, oh, I'm unschooling and my oldest is 7 years old. And like, you're kind of still really in the beginning of your journey there. I feel like you really start to get these ahas once your kids get into the teen years. So at one point, I feel like 11 and 12 are kind of rough years for maybe everybody, especially so for my teens. Both my teens went through some depression, some anxiety kind of stuff around then. And with my daughter, when she was about 13, she was really concerned about, I don't know how to do math. I'm stupid. Like, I feel like I'm, she took some kind of online quiz thing and it said she was at a 3rd grade math level, and she fixated on this and was so upset and just, really distraught. And I feel like we really kind of took it back to that homesteading idea of, self-reliance. So I said to her, and I was like, do you, so you can either choose to view this as a problem, and then you can choose to fix it, or you can choose to view it as a problem and not fix it, not make any effort to fix it, and then, still be distraught. Or you can also choose to just let it go and not care, because that's also a choice. So I really kind of helped her break it down, and she kind of railed and tantrumed a little bit, and then she was like, okay, so help me find a book. I want to do this. I want to look at this. So we pulled out some math books, and I sat with her, and after about 10 minutes, she was like, oh, this is it? Oh, okay. I'm good. I was like, yeah, you are. You're good. And I feel like she's a lot more confident now in that if she wants to learn something, she knows that, you know, I pointed out to her, like, we do have Google. Technology's awesome. You can go and put in, how do I do fractions to decimals or whatever, and she can find that information, because unschooling isn't about, you know, memorizing the rote facts as much as it's learning how to find the information you need when it's irrelevant and when you want to learn it. And so I feel like she's, you know, she's heading toward 15 now, and she's much more confident in where she is with regard to her education, her relationships, all those things. She might still get the odd academic question, say from, you know, extended family, like, oh, what grade are you in? And she just kind of rolls her eyes. She's like, we don't do grades. She's much more, you know, solid in where she's at and how she feels about all that now. So that was definitely a win for me, seeing her feel unshakable in who she is and what she knows, and having that identity as an intelligent person.
I feel like, I guess being homeschooled, you know, there's definitely, you know, when I got out in what I like to call the real world and started my career, you know, there was, yeah, there's definitely some hurdles, because, yeah, my education was different. And so, you know, when you start to run into, you know, different jobs that maybe require, you know, a lot that you would get from, you know, normal education. At one company I was at for a while, I took a kind of a sales position. So all of a sudden I was, you know, I was writing contracts, you know, and I had to do math. I had to make sure the taxes were right, you know, and for the right state. So, you know, literally I'm doing, you know, a lot of math, and then I'm writing up quotes and talking with clients. So I'm writing emails all day. And that was stuff that, you know, I had struggled with, and, you know, hadn't had a, you know, a ton of focus in that area because of the struggle, and, you know, enough to get by. But I definitely in that job realized if I wanted to do this job and do it well, I really, you know, I had to get up to speed with math and really, you know, I'd write these emails, and I would proof them, and I'd proof them again, and be like, you know, I don't know, and I actually had to do, you know, some get back up to speed on some grammar to, I feel like to present, you know, myself in my career the way I wanted to. But I think, you know, with my homeschooling education, just like I'd focused on music for a long time and just got really focused on that, I applied that to my career, where it was like, okay, you know, I want to do this job at this time, and I'm just going to get really focused and learn how to do this better and survive. And it went well, you know, and I enjoyed that part of my career, and I learned a lot, and it was just, you know, it was part of the journey. I hope that's, I guess, a little encouragement to unschooling parents.
It certainly is. It was very helpful always to hear, I think, from adult unschoolers. That's one of the inspirations for at least myself and my husband. So thank you very much for that. Leslie, aha moments that you'd want to share in your homesteading, homeschooling life.
Well, I guess I do. And really, it's not some sort of particular situation I've had on the homestead or with my own homeschooled children, but it's part of my own journey. Like I said, I came from a fairly mainstream sort of place, and this journey for me has really been one of finding my own place in peace and compassion. And I realized that it was really hard for me in the beginning to do the unschooling thing. It was really hard for me to let go. It was really hard for me to go against everything that I was basically taught. And so this journey for me has been releasing all of that. And my big aha moments is the fact that a lot of times my children are a mirror back to me. When I find that they're struggling, a lot of times it's somehow I'm struggling. And it may not be a particular exact incident like, oh, you're struggling like I did, but it's bringing in that compassion and kindness, that patience, and that peaceful place where you can always be and respond from. And I learned that in the garden too, because just as with my children, there's no way that I can force anything. I can only nurture, and I can only support, and I can only give my children in my garden what they need to grow into the people in the beautiful garden that needs to be there. And that really was my biggest aha moment, was the fact that I'm not here to force, and I'm not here to push. I'm here to mentor, and I'm here to support, and I'm here to feed these beautiful lives that have been here to share with me. And that's even including the plants in my garden, the trees that are in my yard. And it's at that point where I needed to have patience, to relax, to be peaceful and come from neutral space so that we all can learn how to live together. Because I realized the more negative I was, the more negative came back around. So that was my big aha moment. It was just pause, peace, and breathe in all aspects, from kids to the garden, you know, to every relationship that I've had.
That's absolutely beautiful, Leslie, and such a neat part of what homeschooling is about, where we are literally all on a learning journey together. And that is absolutely such a beautiful story you're sharing with us. And I love the way it links back to the gardening. Thank you. Now we're almost at the end of the show. So what I'd like to do, I've enjoyed this tremendously. What I want to do is actually do a quick round with everybody. If you want to pass some last words. And now, because during the conversation, one of the things we talked about was how important it is to encourage other folks, because we are all inventing things. I want this last round to be a little bit about what words you'd like to leave to anybody who's thinking of pursuing either the homeschooling, the unschooling, the off-grid life, or the homesteading life, and what thoughts you'd like to leave for those folks who are starting on this journey.
Well, I'll start. Like I said, I think that we all need to have that patience and to really start knowing and trusting yourself. We all have those tapes in our heads telling us you can't, you won't, don't, you know, nobody else is doing it. And at some point you need to rewrite that tape and remind yourself that you can. Just trust in the process and in the flow and go with it instead of fight against it. And seek out help, because people in this community, unschooling, homeschooling, homesteading, we love to talk, we love to share, and we want to answer your questions, and we want you to succeed too, because I want everybody to be as happy as I am in my place here on earth, in my family. So if I can help somebody else do that, I will. Just ask. So come on, bring on the questions.
I guess we're next. Advice for people thinking about going towards this lifestyle: go for it. Work less, live more, avoid debt, embrace hard work, become comfortable with your pain and turn it to compassion. Be connected, and everything's gonna be great.
I mean, I'm a little bit more realist, so I definitely like to talk about how hard it is. And, you know, we're not debt free. So we have had to make income sources for our property. So we talk about that when people come to visit, and we get a lot of tourists in the city through the Airbnb. So we talk about income streams and potential stuff there. And and the hard stuff. I mean, things don't go well. You don't have the financial resources to fix your goat fence every day, and you know, get a new chainsaw when the bar breaks. Sometimes you don't have gas for the tractor. So there's always innovation happening. And so to be prepared to be creative and to be prepared to be innovative, and really, like what Shawn said, to be prepared to work really hard. But it's good. It's a good life. It's connected.
Yeah, no, I'd like to just agree with everything everyone said so far. I mean, it's especially, I mean, with the gardening and the homesteading and livestock, I've really, it's all been very rewarding. It's been a lot of hard work, but it's been rewarding. So, yeah, anyone that's thinking about doing something like this, I feel like it things that, I mean, whether it comes to like, some people go to the gym. I get all my exercise from just trying to work the land and, with there's a lot of things that you see it in holes that it fills in your life that you didn't even know it did when you start. So definitely pursue it. You don't know what you're going to learn from it. And definitely go for it.
Yeah, I think that so much of unschooling, homesteading, permaculture, all of that has to do with shifting your mindset. And I mean, obviously, it's a very active kind of life. You're consciously choosing to do things differently, and the doing part is definitely a big deal. It can't all be theoretical in your head, but shifting your mindset in little bitty ways can really, really help. I've unschooled my kids since 2004, and in 2004, I thought I knew everything about education, and I had to unlearn everything. And then I also have had to unlearn a lot of stuff I thought I knew about food, about family relationships. There's a lot of unlearning. It's a very humbling process. And that's okay. It's okay to not have all the answers and to stumble and fall and make mistakes. It's also, like I said, sometimes the gratification of like seeing your kids really succeed, it takes a long time to get there. My oldest son is turning 18 this year. He's had a job for over a year now, and he was really nervous because, he's starting work as a child who's effectively never been to school for more than a couple months out of his entire life. The only thing that he ran into as a problem is that he didn't know how to draw stars, like a 5-pointed star. Everything else has been totally fine, and if he didn't know how to do it, he figured it out. And his success is heartening that I'm on the right track with the rest of my children as well. And kids are resilient, and so are plants. So it kind of all ties in that way, even if some of your seedlings die, you can start again and keep planting, and eventually things are going to be on the right track. So.
Fantastic. Guys, thank you all so much. I've enjoyed this conversation tremendously. You're all inspirational. I thank you very, very much for being here and for sharing your experience with everybody. Thank you guys very, very much. Your insights have been wonderful, and I know that I personally am drawing a lot from as far as inspiration and the things that you've shared, and having older kids. I think for all of us who are on this journey, seeing the results in other people's families helps keep us on the track. So thank you all for that. I also want to thank the Conscious Consumer Network and our producer, Ann Boyd, for putting the show together. In the words of Lainey Liberty, our regular host, wherever you are, whatever you do, remember, do it for the love of learning.
If we want to change the world, we must first change the media. Mainstream media exists for the purposes of indoctrination and manipulation of public perception. The world of free and independent media is growing, and with the upsurge in information now available in the public domain, it has never been easier to access free and independent media. The exploration of this information resulted in an experimental project which would provide a fully supported space for researchers, whistleblowers, and seekers of all kinds to express themselves and educate the world. On the 1st of January 2015, Conscious Consumer Network was launched to the world. Nobody thought we would make it this far, but CCN is the longest running free and independent media network of its kind. CCN is a unique collaboration of hearts and souls, bringing you information from different perspectives to educate and inform. Since we started CCN, we have had only one desire, the pursuit of a free, fair, just, sustainable world, and this has not changed. Having overcome many challenges over the last 2 years, CCN is here to stay, and we've got great things lined up for 2017. Help keep CCN on the air by supporting the 2017 Network Support Fund.